Move row 24 now!
This is my assigned seat.
You are delaying this flight!
Show me the real reason. Everyone stay calm now. Your seat is rightfully yours! Justice matters more than status.
I was wrong, Mr. Whitman.
Either tell me why my first-class seat was taken, Marcus Whitman said, or this plane does not leave the gate. The words did not come out loud. That made them worse. They moved through the narrow cabin like cold air under a locked door. Seatbelts froze halfway across laps. A woman in row 23 stopped digging through her purse. A man holding a paperback slowly lowered it to his knees. Marcus stood in the aisle of Atlantic Airways Flight 25, tall, broad-shouldered, and still. His navy pinstripe suit had been pressed that morning. Now the jacket was wrinkled at one sleeve, pulled out of shape from the moment a crew member had guided him backward through the cabin, like he was a problem to hide. Behind him sat seat 24C, a middle seat, in economy. The seat they had given him after taking away first-class seat 2A, the seat printed clearly on his boarding pass. At the front of the aisle, Vanessa Cole stood with her tablet clutched against her stomach. She was the senior flight attendant on the flight, 38 years old, polished blonde hair, tight smile, and eyes that kept moving anywhere but Marcus's face. "Sir," she said, keeping her voice low enough to sound professional, but sharp enough for the nearby rows to hear. "You need to sit down. We are preparing for departure." Marcus looked at her. He did not blink. "I was already sitting down," he said, "in the seat I paid for." A few passengers shifted. Vanessa's jaw tightened. There was a weight balance adjustment. "That was explained to you at the gate." "No," Marcus said. "It was stated to me. It was not explained." The engines hummed beneath the floor. The cabin lights cast a yellow glow across tired faces and polished overhead bins. Outside the small oval windows, Atlanta's runway lights blurred in the afternoon haze. No one in that cabin knew who Marcus really was. Not Vanessa. Not the impatient businessman tapping his watch in first class. Not the gate agent who had looked Marcus up and down before handing him a new boarding pass with false sympathy. To them, he was a black man in a fine suit who had somehow become inconvenient. But Marcus Whitman was not inconvenient. He was the founder and chief executive of Iron Gate Systems, one of the most respected cybersecurity companies in the country. Banks trusted his software. Hospitals trusted his software. Federal contractors used his systems to protect data they could not afford to lose. That morning, he had been flying to San Francisco to close a $300 million deal, and now he was standing in economy, asking why an empty leather seat up front mattered more than his dignity. Vanessa stepped closer. Her perfume cut through the stale cabin air. "Mr. Whitman, if you continue blocking the aisle, I will have to report this as refusal to follow crew instructions." There it was. The sentence every black professional knew by instinct. The quiet threat beneath polite words. Marcus felt it land in his chest. He had spent a lifetime learning how to survive that moment. Do not raise your voice. Do not move too quickly. Do not give them the picture they are waiting to paint. So he breathed, slowly, once, twice. Then he lifted the first boarding sin in one hand and the replacement in the other. "This one says seat 2A, he said. "This one says 24C. I want to know who changed it, why they changed it, and why seat 2A is still empty." A man beside him turned his head. "Still empty?" he whispered. Across the aisle, a younger passenger with dark hair and wire-frame glasses raised his phone. His name was Ethan Miller, a technology reporter, who had recognized Marcus the moment he sat down beside him. Ethan's fingers trembled over the screen. He had seen the empty seat. He had taken the photo. Vanessa saw the phone and her face changed. "Sir," she said, "this is not the place." Marcus's voice dropped even lower. "That is exactly the problem." The cabin went silent again. And in that silence, something shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough. A woman near the window stopped looking annoyed and started looking ashamed. An older man in row 26 leaned forward. A child clutched her mother's sleeve, and stared at Marcus as if trying to understand why a grown man had to prove he belonged where his ticket said he belonged. Marcus looked toward the closed curtain separating economy from first class. Behind it, seat 2A waited, empty, bright, untouched, like a challenge. Vanessa swallowed. Her hand moved toward the intercom. Marcus did not step back. He only said, "Call the captain." Vanessa's fingers hovered over the intercom button, but she did not press it right away. For the first time since boarding began, she looked unsure. Not guilty, not yet, just unsure. She could feel the cabin watching her now, not the easy kind of watching that came with service, not the polite eyes of passengers waiting for drinks. This was different. These were witnesses, and witnesses changed everything. Marcus stood 3 feet away, still holding both boarding passes. His hands were steady, but inside him, old memories were waking up. He saw a conference room in Chicago, long glass table, white walls, silver coffee pot. He was 29 then, newly promoted, invited to his first executive strategy meeting. He had arrived early in a charcoal suit and waited near the door. A man from finance had walked in, handed him an empty mug and said, "Black coffee, no sugar." Marcus had smiled. He had taken the mug. Then he had walked to the front of the room, placed it on the table, opened his laptop, and delivered the presentation that saved the company $8 million. No one apologized. That was the part people never understood. The insult was heavy, but the silence after it was heavier. Back in the cabin, a baby cried once, then quieted. The air vents whispered overhead. Somewhere near the rear, someone cleared his throat, then stopped as if even that sound was too much. Vanessa finally lifted the intercom. "Captain Parker," she said, her voice controlled but thin. "We need assistance in the cabin. A passenger is refusing to be seated." Marcus watched her speak the sentence that would become the official version if no one challenged it. Refusing to be seated. Not denied his seat. Not downgraded without proof. Not questioned in public while others walked through untouched. Just refusing. That was how stories got buried. Ethan Miller, still seated beside the empty place, where Marcus should never have been sent, angled his phone lower. He was not trying to create a scene. He knew the power of a recording, but he also knew the danger. One bad angle, one raised voice, one clipped moment without context. A man could become a headline before he became a human being. He looked at Marcus and whispered, "Mr. Whitman, I have the photo of 2A. I also have audio from the gate." Marcus did not turn. "Keep it safe," he said. Vanessa heard him. Her eyes flashed toward Ethan. "Sir, recording crew members without consent may violate airline policy." Ethan lifted his chin. "I am recording a public incident involving a paying passenger." "This is not public," Vanessa said. A dry voice came from row 26. "Feels pretty public to me." The man who spoke was older, maybe in his late 60s, with a faded Vietnam veteran cap resting on his knee. His name was Harold Price, and he had flown this route for years to visit his daughter in Oakland. He had seen rude passengers. He had seen nervous crews. He had seen delays turn grown adults into children. But this was not that. Harold leaned into the aisle and looked at Vanessa. "Mom, I heard him ask for an explanation 3 times. I have not heard one yet." A quiet murmur passed through the cabin. Vanessa's cheeks tightened. "Sir, please remain seated." Harold sat back slowly, but his eyes stayed on her. In first class, behind the curtain, a woman in a cream blazer shifted in her wide leather seat. She had watched Marcus pass earlier with the replacement boarding pass in his hand. She had seen him glance at seat 2A. She had seen the seat remain empty. At the time, she had looked away. That choice now burned. Her name was Elaine Foster, 72, retired school principal. A woman who had spent 4 decades telling children that fairness mattered, then spent too many adult years staying quiet to avoid discomfort. She unbuckled her seatbelt. The click was small, but in that cabin it sounded like a match striking. Vanessa turned sharply. "Mom, you need to stay seated." Elaine stepped into the aisle, one hand gripping the seat back for balance. "No," she said. "I need to say what I saw." Marcus finally looked toward first class. Elaine's voice trembled, but it did not break. "That seat is empty. 2A is empty, and this gentleman walked past it with a first-class boarding pass in his hand. I saw it." The silence deepened. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. At the front, the cockpit door latch clicked. Every phone lifted, every breath held. And Marcus Whitman, the man they had tried to move out of sight, stood taller as Captain William Parker stepped into the aisle. Captain William Parker stopped just past the cockpit door, one hand still resting on the frame. He was 56, with silver at his temples, and the tired eyes of a man who had spent most of his adult life solving problems before they became disasters. He had handled medical emergencies, weather diversions, drunken passengers, mechanical delays, and families grieving mid-flight. But this was different. He could feel it before anyone explained a word. The cabin was too quiet. Phones were up. Vanessa looked too pale, and the man standing in the aisle did not look unstable. He looked controlled. Hurt, yes. Angry, yes. But controlled in the way only a person with years of practice could be. Captain Parker stepped forward. What is going on here? Vanessa moved first. Captain, this passenger is refusing to sit down. We are ready for departure, and he is obstructing the aisle after being reassigned for operational reasons. She said it quickly. Too quickly. Marcus turned his head toward the captain, but did not interrupt. That restraint mattered. Parker noticed it. The captain looked at Marcus. Sir, your name? Marcus Whitman. A flicker crossed Parker's face. The name sounded familiar, but he could not place it under the pressure of the cabin lights and all those waiting eyes. Mr. Whitman, why are you standing? Marcus held up both boarding passes. Because I bought first-class seat 2A. I boarded with that assignment. Then I was told at the gate that I had to move to 24C for weight balance. No document was shown, no explanation was given, and seat 2A is still empty. Parker took the first boarding pass, then the second. His thumb brushed the printed ink. The details were clear. Atlantic Airways Flight 25, Atlanta to San Francisco. Then 24C. The captain's jaw shifted. Weight balance? He asked, looking at Vanessa. That is what ground operations advised, she said. Who advised it? Vanessa hesitated. The gate agent, Tyler Brooks. Parker looked toward the front of the cabin, where Elaine Foster still stood near first class with one hand on the seat back. Mom, did you see the seat empty? Elaine nodded. Her voice was soft, but it carried. Yes, Captain. I saw him walk past 2A. No one was sitting there then. No one is sitting there now. A man in first class added, I saw it too. Another voice came from economy. So did I. The cabin shifted again. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just a slow movement of courage. One person speaking gave another person permission. Vanessa's eyes tightened. Captain, with respect, we cannot let passengers debate operational decisions in the aisle. Marcus turned toward her. No one is debating safety. I am asking whether safety is being used as a cover for something else. The words landed hard. Parker looked down at the boarding passes again. He had worked aviation long enough to know that weight and balance could be real. But he also knew how it worked. A single passenger moved from first class to economy was not something a crew did casually after boarding without documentation, especially when the original seat stayed empty. He turned toward the galley. Where is the final manifest? Vanessa blinked. Captain, we should keep this moving. The manifest, Parker repeated. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. From behind the first-class curtain, Maya Lois stepped forward. She was 33, a flight attendant, with calm eyes and hands that had served coffee through turbulence and comforted crying passengers through missed connections. She held a crew tablet close to her chest. Captain, I have the current manifest. Vanessa spun toward her. Maya. But Maya kept walking. Her mouth was dry. Her heart was knocking. She knew what it meant to challenge a senior crew member. Schedules got changed. Promotions disappeared. People called you difficult with a smile? Still, she handed the tablet to Parker. Mr. Whitman is listed in seat 2A, she said. There is no weight balance alert in the system. No cabin advisory. No reassignment marked for any other first-class passenger. The words hung in the air. Clean, plain, unforgiving. Vanessa's face drained. Parker stared at the screen. Then he looked back at Marcus, and the pieces began to lock together. Sir, he said carefully now, were you given a reason before the weight balance explanation? Marcus's eyes moved to Vanessa. At first, I was told there was a verification issue. Then I was told first class was full. Then I walked past my empty seat. Ethan Miller lifted his phone slightly. Captain, I recorded the gate conversation. I also photographed seat 2A when Mr. Whitman was sent back here. I am a reporter, but right now I am also a witness. Vanessa whispered, "This is getting out of hand." Marcus heard her. "No," he said. His voice was calm. "This is finally being seen." Tyler Brooks reached the aircraft door with his tie crooked and his face already damp with sweat. He was 34, young enough to still want approval from everyone above him, old enough to know when something had gone too far. In his right hand, he carried a printed manifest. In his left, he held a radio that kept crackling with voices from the gate. Captain Parker stood at the front of the aisle and did not move. "Tyler," he said. "Why was Mr. Whitman reassigned?" Tyler glanced past him, at Vanessa, at the passengers, at the phones. His throat worked before words came out. "Captain, there was a concern about balance. We were trying to make a quick operational adjustment to keep the flight on time." Maya Lewis looked down at her tablet, then back up. "There is no balance alert," she said. Tyler's eyes snapped to her. Maya did not look away. Captain Parker held out his hand. "Show me the alert." Tyler shuffled the papers as if the answer might appear between them. His fingers trembled. The aisle seemed to shrink around him. Every recording phone became a small square of judgment. "I do not have the specific alert printed," he said. "Then who issued it?" Parker asked. "Ground operations." "Who in ground operations?" Tyler swallowed. "I would have to check." Marcus stood beside row 24, silent now. He had asked his question. The cabin was asking it for him. A woman in first class spoke under her breath, but everyone heard it. He does not have an answer. Vanessa stepped in quickly. "Captain, with respect, gate decisions happen fast." Tyler was following procedure. Parker turned toward her. "Which procedure allows a confirmed first-class passenger to be moved to economy while his assigned seat remains open?" Vanessa's mouth tightened. "That is not fair." Marcus finally spoke. "Neither was what happened to me." The words were not loud, but they carried to the back rows. Tyler looked at Marcus for the first time, with something close to shame. Not full shame, not yet, but the beginning of it. The look of a man who had obeyed a suggestion because it was easier than asking why. Ethan Miller's phone buzzed in his hand, then buzzed again. His post had started moving beyond friends, beyond tech circles, beyond strangers with opinions. He glanced down. Atlantic Airways discrimination. Marcus Whitman. Seat 2, say. The words were spreading. Ethan looked up, his face pale with the weight of what he had helped unleash. "Mr. Whitman," he said softly, "this is gaining traction." Vanessa heard that too. Her composure cracked for 1 second. "How many people?" she asked. Ethan did not answer her. Captain Parker did. That is not the issue right now. But everyone knew it was part of the issue. In modern America, a thing could be ignored until it was seen. Then it became a crisis. A passenger in row 27 raised his hand like he was in a town hall meeting. He was in a gray blazer, late 40s, with reading glasses low on his nose. "Captain, I am an employment attorney. I am not giving legal advice here. But I will say this. If there is no documented operational reason, and only one passenger was downgraded, the optics are serious." Vanessa snapped, "Sir, please do not interfere." The attorney lowered his hand, but not his voice. "I am not interfering. I am witnessing." That word moved through the cabin. Witnessing. Marcus felt it settle somewhere deep. For most of his life, he had not been angry that people mistreated him. He had been angry that other people watched it happen and made peace with it. They looked at their shoes. They checked their phones. They pretended not to hear. Today, some of them were finally looking up. Captain Parker turned to Tyler again. "Did Mr. Whitman become disruptive at the gate?" Tyler's lips parted. He asked for a supervisor. "Did he shout? No. Did he threaten anyone? No. Did he present a valid boarding pass?" Tyler stared down at the paper in his hand. Yes. The cabin went still. Parker's eyes hardened. Then why was he moved? Tyler's shoulders sank. "Because Vanessa said we should re-verify him," he whispered. "She said he did not seem like the passenger profile for 2A. The sound that followed was not a gasp. It was worse. It was a collective intake of breath from people realizing they had just heard the truth. Vanessa went white. That is not what I meant. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time his calm showed a crack. Not rage. Pain. Then explain what you meant. Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing came. At the front, Captain Parker slowly folded the boarding passes together. "Mr. Whitman," he said, "your seat is 2A. Then his radio chirped. Ground supervisor coming aboard. The aisle turned toward the door, and Marcus knew the fight had just moved beyond one flight attendant. Daniel Reyes stepped onto the aircraft with the heavy stride of a man who had already heard too many versions of the same story. He was 48, ground operations supervisor for Atlantic Airways at Atlanta, and he had spent the last decade putting out fires before passengers ever knew they had started. Missed connections, broken seats, weather delays, crews running out of hours. He knew how to calm people down. He knew when to offer miles. He knew when to say policy and when to say compassion. But the moment he saw the cabin, he knew miles would not fix this. Phones were everywhere. The air felt charged. Captain Parker stood like a wall at the front of economy, and beside him stood Marcus Whitman, holding himself with a stillness that made Daniel slow his pace. Tyler Brooks stood near the galley, pale and silent. Vanessa Cole would not meet anyone's eyes. Daniel took one breath, then stepped forward. "Captain Parker, what do we have?" Parker handed him the boarding passes and Maya's tablet. Confirmed first-class seat 2A. Reissued to 24C. No documented weight balance alert. No system note. No other passenger moved. Daniel's face tightened as he read. He had seen mistakes before, real ones. Overlapping seats after aircraft swaps. Last-minute equipment changes. Manual updates that failed to sync. But this did not feel like a mistake. It felt human. And human mistakes were often the hardest to admit. He looked at Marcus. "Mr. Whitman, I'm Daniel Reyes. I'm the ground supervisor on duty. I understand you were moved from first class." Marcus's gaze stayed steady. "Was not moved. I was removed from a seat I paid for." Daniel accepted the correction with a small nod. "That mattered. You're right," he said. "Removed." That one word shifted something. A few passengers lowered their phones slightly. Not because the moment was over, but because someone in authority had finally repeated the truth without sanding it down. Vanessa spoke quickly. "Daniel, Tyler acted on a concern I raised. We were trying to verify the passenger record before departure. The situation became tense because Mr. Whitman resisted the reassignment." Marcus turned his head. "I asked for proof." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "You challenged the process." "A process that did not exist," Maya said quietly. Vanessa looked at her as if she had been slapped. Maya's hands shook around the tablet, but she did not step back. She had spent years smiling through things that made her stomach hurt. Passengers calling her sweetheart. Supervisors praising her tone while overlooking her work. Senior crew telling her to be careful when she spoke too clearly. Today, careful had begun to feel like another word for afraid. Daniel looked at Maya. "You checked the system yourself?" "Yes, twice. There is no note authorizing a downgrade. Mr. Whitman's original seat 8 remains assigned to him." Ethan Miller raised his phone. "Mr. Reyes, I have video from the gate. Tyler says weight balance after Miss Cole speaks to him privately. Before that, he calls it a verification issue. Those are two different reasons." Daniel looked at Ethan. "And you are?" "Ethan Miller, technology reporter. But right now, I am a passenger who watched this happen." The word reporter moved through the cabin like electricity. Tyler closed his eyes. Daniel's radio crackled at his hip. "Ops to Reyes. Media team is asking for status. Social is picking up fast." Daniel did not answer right away. Captain Parker heard it. So did Vanessa. So did half the cabin. A man in row 21 whispered, "It's already online." Another voice said, "Good." Vanessa's breathing became shallow. Her face, once hard with authority, now looked smaller, not innocent, just exposed. Daniel turned to Tyler. "Tell me exactly what happened at the gate." Tyler rubbed both hands down his pants, leaving damp streaks on the fabric. "Mr. Whitman boarded with first class. Vanessa came to me and said he should be re-verified. She said there might be an issue with the profile attached to the booking." Daniel's brow lowered. "Profile?" Tyler glanced at Marcus, then away. She said he did not fit what she expected for 2A. The cabin went cold. Elaine Foster, still near the front, covered her mouth. Harold Price shook his head slowly. The veteran cap now clenched in his hand. Vanessa whispered, "I meant travel profile, status history, payment risk. That's all." Marcus stepped forward 1 pace. "Then why did no one check my payment? Why did no one ask for my status card? Why did no one call customer service? Why was the solution to put me in the back while the seat stayed empty?" No one answered, because there was no clean answer. Daniel looked at Marcus, and finally recognition broke across his face. "Whitman," he said softly. "Iron Gate Systems." Ethan looked up. A few passengers began searching on their phones. Marcus did not smile. "Yes." Daniel's posture changed, not into fear, into understanding. He now knew this was not just a passenger with a valid complaint. This was one of the most influential cybersecurity executives in the country, standing in an aisle because his dignity had been treated as negotiable. But Marcus saw the change and lifted one hand. "Do not treat me differently because you recognize my company." Daniel froze. Marcus's voice dropped. "Treat me correctly because I am a human being." That should have been enough at the gate. It should be enough now. The cabin fell silent again. Not with shock this time, with shame. Daniel lowered his eyes to the boarding passes. Then he turned toward the front of the plane and spoke into his radio. "Hold departure. Notify regional management. This aircraft is not pushing back until this is resolved on board." The words "hold departure" moved through the aircraft faster than any announcement could have. Passengers looked at one another. Some with relief, some with worry, some with that quiet, guilty look people get when they know they watched something wrong and nearly said nothing. Vanessa stepped back toward the galley. Her hand pressed against the counter, knuckles pale. Tyler stood beside her, staring at the floor. Daniel Reyes stayed in the aisle, listening as his radio exploded with updates from operations, customer care, and someone from corporate communications who sounded much too awake for a routine delay. Captain Parker kept his eyes on the cabin. "Nobody moves this aircraft," he said, "until I know we are not carrying an unresolved discrimination complaint into the sky." That sentence changed the room. For the first time, the captain had named it. Not a misunderstanding, not a passenger issue, a discrimination complaint. Marcus took in the words without celebration. He knew language had power. He also knew language could become decoration if nobody acted on it. Ethan Miller's phone buzzed so many times it looked alive in his hand. He glanced down, then swallowed. "Mr. Whitman, local news is asking for comment. Tech leaders are reposting. They know it is you now." Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. There it was, the part he had feared. Not embarrassment. He could survive embarrassment. He had survived worse. What he feared was becoming a symbol before anyone remembered he was a man with a meeting to reach. A wife waiting for updates, employees depending on him, and a heart that still got tired. He thought of his wife, Angela, standing in their kitchen that morning in Atlanta, handing him coffee in a travel mug. She had looked at his tie and smiled. "Remember," she had said, "do not let the world make you smaller just because it is uncomfortable with your size." At the time, he had laughed. Now the sentence pressed against his ribs like a hand holding him upright. Daniel's radio crackled again. "Reyes, regional director, is on the way. Olivia Carter is boarding with station manager." Daniel answered, "Copy." A few seconds later, footsteps sounded in the jet bridge. Olivia Carter entered first. She was 45, dressed in a navy blazer and low heels, her hair pulled back, a leather folder tucked under one arm. Her expression was professional, but her eyes moved quickly. She saw the phones, the captain, Vanessa, Tyler, Marcus. She knew immediately this was worse than the message had suggested. Behind her came station manager Paul Kendrick, a broad man in his 50s with a red face and the forced calm of someone already thinking about liability. Olivia stopped in front of Marcus. "Mr. Whitman, I am Olivia Carter, regional director for Atlantic Airways. I want to apologize for the delay and for any confusion that occurred." Marcus looked at her. "Any confusion?" Olivia paused. It was a small phrase, a corporate phrase, smooth, safe, empty. Marcus let the silence sharpen it. Olivia corrected herself. "For what occurred?" Marcus nodded once. Better. Paul Kendrick stepped in too quickly. We are prepared to reseat you in first class immediately and offer appropriate compensation. Travel credit, refund, whatever is reasonable. We would like to get everyone to San Francisco safely and discuss the rest after landing. A low murmur spread through the cabin. That was the old move. Move the person. Quiet the room. Pay the problem. Protect the brand. Marcus had seen it in boardrooms, in lawsuits, in public relations disasters where the harmed person was asked to be patient so the powerful could stay comfortable. He looked at Paul. You want me to sit down so the plane can leave? Paul forced a smile. We want to resolve the immediate issue. No, Marcus said. You want to contain it. The words struck clean. Paul's face tightened. Olivia raised one hand, stopping him before he could answer. Mr. Whitman, what would resolution look like to you right now? Marcus looked around the cabin, at Elaine Foster, who had finally sat down but still held herself stiffly with emotion. At Harold Price, who nodded once, as if telling him to keep going. At Maya Lewis, whose courage might cost her something. At Ethan, whose phone was documenting a truth Marcus had not asked to carry alone. Then Marcus looked back at Olivia. First, I returned to seat 2A because it is mine, not as a favor, not as compensation, because it was never theirs to take. Olivia nodded slowly. Second, Marcus continued. The airline acknowledges in front of these passengers that my reassignment was not supported by a documented operational reason. Vanessa made a small sound. Paul shifted. Marcus did not stop. Third, the people involved do not disappear behind private discipline and a vague statement. There needs to be a real investigation with the data preserved. Gate audio, crew messages, seat logs, manifest changes, everything. Olivia's face grew still. She understood then this was not anger performing for cameras. This was leadership. Marcus's voice lowered. And fourth, you explain how a passenger can show a valid ticket and still be treated like he has to prove he is worthy of the space he paid for. No one spoke. The engines hummed. A child whispered, Mom, he is right. And that tiny voice made the silence heavier than any speech. Olivia Carter did not answer right away. She looked down at the aisle carpet, then at the passengers, then at Marcus. Her face carried the strain of two jobs fighting inside one body. One job was to protect the airline. The other was to do what was right. Everyone could see which one was winning. She turned to Paul Kendrick. Preserve every record tied to this boarding process. Gate scan logs, crew tablet entries, internal messages, seat change records, radio traffic, all of it. Paul stiffened. Olivia, we should have legal direct that. I am directing it now. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through him. Paul looked away first. Captain Parker gave a small nod. The kind pilots give when they see someone finally take command of a bad situation. Marcus remained still. He did not soften. He did not gloat. His eyes stayed on Olivia, watching whether her words would become action or dissolve into theater. Olivia stepped closer to the center aisle. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, raising her voice just enough. My name is Olivia Carter. I am Regional Director for Atlantic Airways. Based on what has been reviewed on board, Whitman's reassignment from first-class seat 2A to economy was not supported by the documentation currently available to us. The cabin went silent. Even the phones seemed to stop moving. Olivia continued. He will be returned to his original seat. We will preserve the records connected to this incident. We will conduct a formal review. And I want to say clearly, in front of everyone here, that no customer should be made to feel they do not belong in a seat they lawfully purchased. A breath moved through the cabin. Not applause, not yet, just release. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time, she seemed to understand that authority without humility could become a harm. She had spent years believing her instincts were professional judgment. Now those instincts were being named in public as something else. Tyler wiped at his forehead. He looked sick. Marcus looked at Olivia. That is a start, he said. Paul's eyes narrowed. A start? Marcus turned to him. Yes, a start. He lifted the two boarding passes again. The paper trembled just slightly now, not from fear, but from the weight of holding himself together for too long. This is what people miss, Marcus said. The seat matters, but not because it is leather. Not because it is wider. Not because it comes with a glass before takeoff. It matters because the moment someone can take it from me without reason, every right becomes conditional. His voice slowed, and when rights become conditional, the people with less power always pay first. No one interrupted him. Not Paul, not Vanessa, not the passengers who had been annoyed by the delay minutes earlier. Marcus looked toward Maya. Some people saw what happened and chose to tell the truth. Maya lowered her eyes, overwhelmed. Then he looked toward Elaine and Harold. Some people decided silence was no longer acceptable. Elaine pressed a hand over her heart. Marcus faced Olivia again. I will return to my seat, but I want a written incident record before departure, naming that the reassignment lacked documented operational support. I want a case number. I want contact from your corporate ethics office before this flight lands. And I want Maya Lewis protected from retaliation. Maya looked up sharply. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward her. Olivia did not hesitate this time. Agreed. Paul inhaled. Olivia, you cannot promise all of that on the cabin floor. Olivia turned on him. I can promise protection from retaliation. And I can open a corporate ethics case before we push back. She pulled out her phone, now. That word landed like a gavel. Ethan Miller whispered into his phone. They are opening an ethics case on board before departure. His live update moved instantly. Across airport lounges, office desks, kitchen tables, and phones in parked cars, strangers watched the story change shape. It was no longer just about a black executive removed from first class. It was about what happens when ordinary witnesses refuse to let a false version become the official one. Captain Parker stepped beside Marcus. Mr. Whitman, seat 2A is ready. Marcus looked through the cabin toward the curtain. For a moment, he did not move. He thought of his father, who had worked night shifts at a steel plant until his hands cracked in winter. He thought of his mother, who taught second grade and kept extra pencils in her purse because some children came to school with nothing. They had taught him that dignity was not something other people gave you. It was something you protected. Even when your voice shook, even when everyone watched, even when it cost time, comfort, and peace. Marcus took one step forward, then another. As he passed row 26, Harold Price stood halfway and held out his hand. You did right, son. Marcus took it. Thank you, sir. Elaine Foster wiped her eyes as he passed first class. I am sorry I waited so long to speak, she said. Marcus paused. But you spoke. That was enough to make her cry. At seat 2A, the leather was untouched. The blanket still folded, the window shade half open, sunlight resting across the armrest like it had been waiting for him. Marcus sat down, not in victory, in witness. Behind him, the cabin remained quiet. Then one person clapped, then another, then many. Vanessa stood frozen near the galley as the sound filled the aircraft, not loud like celebration, but steady like a promise. The applause faded into something heavier than silence. Marcus sat in seat 2A with his hands resting on the armrests, feeling the soft leather beneath his fingers, feeling every eye behind him, every camera, every breath. The seat was his again, but his body had not caught up with that truth. His shoulders still carried the walk to economy. His chest still carried the lie. Across the aisle, Elaine Foster watched him with wet eyes. She had spent her life correcting children gently, believing that the truth was something people wanted once they saw it clearly. Now, at 72, she was learning that truth often had to be dragged into the open, shaking and bruised. Captain Parker leaned into the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are addressing a serious customer service and conduct matter before departure. We will update you shortly. He stopped there. No soft cover, no false comfort. It was enough. Olivia Carter stood near the front galley with her phone to her ear, speaking in a low voice to the corporate ethics office. Her tone had changed. It no longer sounded like delay management. It sounded like a record being built. Yes, she said. Open the case now. Name Mr. Marcus Whitman as complainant. Preserve all gate and cabin records. Include crew communications and seat reassignment logs. I want confirmation before pushback. Paul Kendrick stood beside her, jaw locked. He was not cruel by nature, but he was trained by years of corporate survival to see risk before people. He kept glancing at the passengers' phones as if each screen were a leak in a dam. Olivia covered the phone and looked at him. Paul, stop looking at the cameras and look at the man. Paul blinked. For a second, he almost argued. Then he looked at Marcus. Really looked. Not at the suit. Not at the name. Not at the future lawsuit forming in his mind. At the man. Marcus was seated upright, but tired, not weak. Tired. The kind of tired that came from having to remain perfect while being mistreated, because one wrong breath could be used against you. Paul's expression shifted. Small, but real. At the galley, Vanessa Cole stared at the floor. Tyler Brooks stood a few feet away, his face drawn tight with grit. Neither spoke to the other. Shame had made a wall between them. Maya Lewis passed Marcus with a bottle of water. She paused beside his seat. "Would you like this, Mr. Whitman?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. Marcus accepted it. "Thank you, Ms. Lewis." She nodded, then lowered her voice. "I should have said something sooner." Marcus looked up. "You said it when it mattered." Maya swallowed hard. "That does not make the earlier silence right." "No," Marcus said softly, "but it makes the next choice different." Those words stayed with her as she walked away. They would stay with her for years. Behind Marcus, Ethan Miller continued typing, but slower now. The reporter in him wanted facts, quotes, timestamps. The human being in him wanted to stop and let the moment breathe. His phone showed messages from editors, producers, strangers, activists, airline employees. Everyone wanted more. Everyone wanted the clip. Everyone wanted the name of the flight attendant. But Ethan looked at Marcus and realized the story could not only be about punishment. If it was only about one person falling, the lesson would be too small. He typed carefully. What happened on this flight is not only about one employee. It is about the quiet systems that allow bias to sound like policy. He stared at the sentence, then posted it. At the front, Olivia ended her call and stepped into the aisle again. "Mr. Whitman, the ethics case has been opened. The case number has been created. Corporate records preservation is active. You will receive written confirmation before we depart." Marcus nodded. "And Maya Lewis?" Olivia turned toward Maya, who stood by the galley. "Ms. Lewis is protected from retaliation related to her participation in this incident. I will put that in writing as part of the report." Maya closed her eyes briefly. Vanessa finally looked up. Her voice came out strained. "What about me?" Everyone turned. For the first time, she sounded less like an authority figure and more like a person standing in the wreckage of her own choices. Olivia faced her. "You will be removed from duty pending investigation." Vanessa flinched. Tyler's lips parted, but he said nothing. Marcus watched Vanessa absorb it. He felt no joy. That surprised him, though maybe it should not have. He did not want revenge. Revenge was too small for what had happened. He wanted memory. He wanted change. He wanted the next passenger to be believed before humiliation became necessary. Vanessa looked at Marcus. "I did not think it would become this." Marcus's eyes held hers. "That is part of the problem," he said. "You thought the harm was only real if people saw it." Vanessa's face crumpled, not dramatically, not for sympathy, just enough to show that the sentence had reached a place her defenses could not cover. At that moment, Paul Kendrick's phone buzzed. He read the screen. Then his face went pale. Olivia noticed. "What is it?" Paul turned the phone toward her. National media had picked up the story. The headline was already forming. Paul handed the phone to Olivia without saying a word. She read the headline once, then again. A respected business publication had already posted the first article. Other outlets were linking to it within minutes. The photograph Ethan had taken of the empty first-class seat sat above the story, like a question no airline wanted to answer. Marcus Whitman removed from confirmed first-class seat while assigned seat remained empty. Olivia slowly lowered the phone. "This is moving faster than I expected," she admitted. Marcus looked out the window. The wing stretched across the afternoon light. Baggage carts rolled past. Fuel trucks moved with practiced precision. Beyond the glass, the airport continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Life always did that. History rarely announced itself while it was happening. Captain Parker checked his watch. "We have been at the gate long enough." He looked at Olivia. "Can we depart?" She answered carefully. Operationally, yes. Ethically, only if we finish what we started. Marcus appreciated that answer, not because it solved everything, because it admitted something important. Justice was not a box to check before pushback. Paul cleared his throat. Corporate communications wants a statement released immediately. Marcus turned toward him. Before departure, yes. Good. Paul frowned. You agree? Marcus nodded. If you are willing to speak publicly before this aircraft leaves the ground, people will know your apology is meant for more than damage control. Olivia looked at him with growing respect. You keep asking us to think beyond this flight. Marcus gave a faint smile. Because this stopped being about me a long time ago. He looked toward the back of the cabin. There is someone on another flight today who has not yet been questioned. Someone walking into a hotel. Someone entering a boardroom. Someone wondering whether they belong. If this changes how they are treated, then this delay was worth every minute. The words settled over the cabin. Harold Price leaned back and quietly wiped his eyes. He had grandchildren now. One of them had started college the previous year. He thought about every conversation he had ever postponed, because speaking up felt uncomfortable. He promised himself there would be fewer of those. Across the aisle, Elaine Foster opened the notes application on her phone. She began writing a letter to the school district, where she had worked for 40 years. She wanted to volunteer again. She wanted to speak with new teachers about the quiet ways assumptions entered classrooms before lessons even began. Maya watched them both. She realized courage spread the way fear did. One person, then another, then another. Ethan's phone vibrated again. He looked down. His editor had sent only one sentence. Do not lose the human story. Ethan smiled. For the first time that afternoon, journalism felt less like chasing a headline and more like protecting one. At the front of the aircraft, Olivia received another call. She listened, then nodded, understood. She ended the call and faced the cabin. Atlantic Airways will release a public statement within the next 10 minutes. It will acknowledge that Mr. Whitman was improperly reassigned without documented operational support. It will confirm an independent review. It will also announce a review of boarding procedures and employee training related to bias and customer treatment. Several passengers exchanged surprised looks. That was more than anyone expected before departure. Marcus stood slowly. Not because he wanted attention, because he wanted everyone to hear the next part. Miss Carter. Olivia looked at him. Training matters, policies matter. But they only work if people understand something deeper. She nodded for him to continue. Marcus rested one hand on the seat in front of him. Bias rarely begins with hatred. Sometimes it begins with certainty. The certainty that you already know who belongs, who looks successful, who deserves trust, who should be questioned. Those quiet assumptions change lives every day. His voice remained calm. If your employees only remember one lesson from today, let it be this. Curiosity is safer than certainty. Ask before assuming. Listen before deciding. Treat every person with the dignity you hope someone would give your own family. The cabin remained completely still. Even Vanessa listened. She had spent years believing confidence made her good at her job. Now she wondered how often certainty had replaced curiosity. Olivia extended her hand toward Marcus. Mr. Whitman, on behalf of Atlantic Airways, I am sorry. Marcus looked at her hand for a moment. Then he shook it. Not because everything had been repaired. Because someone had finally chosen accountability over excuses. Captain Parker smiled for the first time that afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your extraordinary patience. If there are no further issues, we will begin our pushback. A quiet cheer rolled through the cabin. Outside, the tug connected to the nose wheel. The aircraft began to move backward from the gate. Marcus leaned against the window as Atlanta slowly drifted away. His phone lit up. One message. From Angela. I watched the whole thing. I am proud of you. You remembered who you are. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment. For the first time that day, his breathing felt easy. The flight to San Francisco had finally begun. The journey that mattered even more had only just started. By the time Flight 25 reached cruising altitude, the cabin had changed. The leather seats were the same. The lights were the same. The soft engine hum was the same. But the people were not. Marcus Whitman sat by the window in seat 2A, looking out at the blue stretch above the clouds. His phone kept lighting up, but he did not rush to answer every message. For once, he let the world move without chasing it. Across the aisle, Elaine Foster watched him quietly. Behind him, Harold Price had fallen back into his seat, his veteran cap resting over his heart. Ethan Miller was no longer typing fast. He was listening, watching, letting the story become more than a scandal. Then Marcus's phone vibrated again. Rachel Bennett, his chief operating officer. He answered in a low voice. "Rachel, I am all right." Her breath came through the speaker first, then her voice. The board saw the statement. Horizon saw it too. They still want the meeting. More than that, they asked if you would speak about leadership before the negotiation starts. Marcus closed his eyes. For a moment, all the noise fell away. The humiliation, the aisle, the false smile, the empty seat. What remained was the strange weight of being seen, not as angry, not as difficult, as human, Rachel continued. "Marcus, you did not damage the deal, you strengthened it." He looked down at his hand on the armrest. "No," he said softly. "The witnesses did that. Maya did that. Ethan did that. The passengers who spoke did that. And you stood," Rachel said. "Someone had to stand first." Marcus said nothing, because she was right. Near the front galley, Vanessa Cole sat in a jump seat removed from service, hands folded tightly in her lap. She did not cry loudly. She did not ask for pity. She stared at the floor as if replaying every step that had led her here. Maya Lewis passed by with quiet purpose, now assigned to cover first class until landing. When she reached Marcus, she paused. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Whitman?" Marcus looked up at her. "Just keep doing your job the way you did it today." Maya's eyes filled, but she smiled. "I will." It was a small exchange, almost nothing. But sometimes healing begins in almost nothing. A word, a nod, a truth spoken before it disappears. A short time later, Captain Parker's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Parker. We are on our way to San Francisco. I want to thank you for your patience today. I also want to say this clearly. Safety matters, procedure matters, but dignity matters too. Every person on this aircraft deserves to be treated with respect. That should never depend on appearance, seat number, title, or assumption." No one clapped at first. The words needed room. Then a few hands came together, softly, steadily. Marcus looked out the window as the aircraft cut through white clouds. He thought of his father coming home from the steel plant with hands darkened by work. He thought of his mother grading papers at the kitchen table, telling him that knowledge could open doors. But character decided what you did once you got inside. Hours later, when the plane landed in San Francisco, no one rushed to stand. Passengers waited as Marcus gathered his briefcase. Elaine touched his arm gently. "Thank you," she said. Marcus shook his head. "Thank you for speaking." Harold offered a firm handshake. "You reminded us," he said, "that silence can become permission." Marcus held his hand a moment longer. "Then let us remember that before the next time." At the jet bridge, Olivia Carter was waiting with a printed incident confirmation, a corporate ethics case number, and a written protection notice for Maya Lewis. It was not justice completed, not yet, but it was justice started in writing where denial could no longer erase it. Outside the terminal, Ethan asked one final question. "Whitman, what do you want people to take from this?" Marcus turned toward the glass wall. Beyond it, planes lifted into the evening sky, one after another, carrying strangers to places where they all hoped to arrive safely. He answered quietly, "Do not wait until someone is powerful to treat them with respect. Treat them with respect before you know who they are. That is the test." 6 months later, Atlantic Airways had changed its boarding review process, launched bias training for frontline staff, and created a Passenger Equity Advisory Council. Iron Gate Systems helped build the reporting platform, not for a publicity win, but because Marcus insisted the data had to protect ordinary travelers, not just famous ones. Maya Lewis joined that council. Ethan's reporting won awards. Vanessa, after leaving the airline, enrolled in a workplace ethics program and later wrote a letter to Marcus. She did not ask forgiveness. She acknowledged harm. That was where her own repair began. And Marcus kept flying, not because he forgot, because he refused to let one stolen seat steal his peace. If this story stayed with you, ask yourself one thing. When you see someone being judged before they are known, will you look away, or will you become the witness who helps the truth stand up? Leave your thoughts below, and share this with someone who still believes dignity should never need a boarding pass.